Basically. All right. Hello, everyone. So my name is Jessica Chaska. I am a pelvic floor physical therapist at Ladybird Physical Therapy, which is a clinic in Austin, Texas. And we specialize in treating people who like through pregnancy, postpartum, but also just general pelvic health conditions. And so I'm really excited to have Amber on today because we are going to talk all about hormonal changes and hormonal imbalances. So, Amber, if you don't mind, will you introduce yourself for us?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you for having me. This is one of my very favorite topics. I am a nutritional therapy practitioner and health coach, and I live in Austin, Texas, here with my husband and my two little boys. I have a 6-year-old son named James and Griffin, who's 4. And fun fact is when I had Griffin 4 years ago, I needed some pelvic floor PT, and Jessica was actually my PT, and she freaking saved my life. I
Oh
really needed
man.
help. And so, yeah, I cannot speak more highly of just like going and having yourself assessed and getting some help if you are having some issues. But my specialty is optimizing women's health, essentially. So I help women, get their energy back, feel like themselves again after they have their kiddos. And I do that using data. So I like to take a data-driven approach, and I source that data from my clients themselves, right? So what symptoms are they experiencing? What food are they eating? What's happening in their lifestyles? What do the functional labs that they are taking, come back saying? So it might be a blood chemistry panel or a gut health test or a hormone panel, things like that. And I use all that information to build a plan that is a food first plan and supplements and lifestyle, to really help bring the body back into balance, depending on what was out of whack. And something that makes me a little bit different from other practitioners like myself is that I really, and you'll see it through this conversation, I really don't take an all or nothing approach. I think that there is room for all foods, and progress over perfection is my mantra. I really subscribe to the fact that you can just do some small little things and get big benefits from those things if you can just stay consistent. You don't have to do everything all at once, but we'll talk more about that, as it unfolds.
Wow, that sounds so sustainable versus what other
Yes.
things can feel like. Well, this actually isn't part of the question, but I am kind of, or like the questions that I sent you, at least not to throw you a curveball, but like, so
Yeah.
how did you get into this? Like, how did that, was the turn of events?
Yeah. So I actually come from corporate tech, the tech space, and I was in corporate marketing at a software company for 7 years. And the moms on the call might be able to relate with this. I experienced an identity crisis when I had kids. I was like, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what I want. And nutrition has always been a hobby of mine and a dream, and to actually like focus on that. And so after I had my second son, I just decided, you know what, life is too short. I want to go do what I want to do. And I quit my corporate job and I went back to get my nutritional therapy practitioner's certification, did that for school for a year, and then started my business. And I've been taking clients, ever since. So that's basically it in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. That's really cool. Okay, well then the big part that like we want to talk about today is like hormonal imbalances, but can you kind of tell us, I guess, like what are hormonal changes that typically occur in pregnancy, and then like what does it mean to be imbalanced? Is that too broad of a
Yes.
question? Okay.
No, I think it's good. And we can drill down to, as
Mm-hmm.
we go. But essentially, like the two big hormones that you think of most often in pregnancy, especially, are progesterone and estrogen, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
progesterone is that hormone that helps keep the uterine lining in place so that you can actually carry your baby to term. And then the estrogen is what actually builds the lining up in the beginning and just like allows that egg to implant. And then once you get pregnant, those hormones rise and they stay very high through the entire pregnancy. They have lots of other functions too, though, right? It's not just those two
Yeah.
things. And some of those functions like are good and bad. When you're pregnant, it's the estrogen that's making you feel glowy, like your skin's glowing, your hair is like getting really long and shiny, but it also is making your breasts really painful. It's like giving you mood swings. Progesterone can make you feel one of the reasons why you get so constipated is because there's really high levels of progesterone. That also plays a part in like the heartburn. And I mean, there's just like so much that those things touch. So when you're pregnant, those are both really, really high and they stay that way until you give birth. There's some other hormones too, kind of peppered in there, like you're a PT, so I'm sure you're really familiar with relaxin, which is the hormone that like loosens joints so you can have your baby come out of your vagina easily. Well, easy. I don't know if anything's easy
Easier.
in that
Yeah.
process. Yeah. HCG, which is like what they test for when you get pregnant. And then thyroid hormone production increases because you need to produce enough for yourself and, you know, the growing baby. So there's like a bunch of other sort of key players in there.
Mhm.
So those are the key ones. And then I guess, does it make sense maybe to talk about what happens like once you give birth to those hormones?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That sounds
So
good. Tell us.
right like at the moment of like birth, progesterone and estrogen plummet, right? They just go right into the tank, and they unfortunately you know, stay that way for a while. And that's one of the reasons why we might get the baby blues. So those first couple weeks you might feel a little bit depressed or anxious. I mean, your hormones are just, you were enjoying the high levels in pregnancy and then they're gone, and that really can impact your the way you're feeling. But those hormones can actually stay suppressed for quite a while, depending on your breastfeeding status, right? So if you are producing milk, especially if you're emptying out your breast like every couple hours, then that requires another hormone called prolactin, and that suppresses estrogen and progesterone. And so while you're in that stage of breastfeeding where you are feeding very often, it's almost like you're in menopause. Like it's kind of a similar experience to being in
I
menopause.
use that exact phrase with my patients
Yeah.
all the time. Yeah. I'm like, this isn't fun, but it's not very nice. It's not very nice, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that also means like some of the negative things that come along with menopause. I mean, that also can impact you in that time. Estrogen, you know, like thins tissue, and that can be an issue for pelvic floor and stuff like that. Um, so
Well,
I really go ahead.
well, I was gonna say that's exactly where I would see it is like, oh, painful sex, chronic UTIs, or just pain at scar. But I guess I'm curious where, like, what would like chronic suppression of estrogen look like? Maybe at a more systemic level, I guess.
Yes, yes. Okay. So you just, it's the womanly hormone, right? So
Mm-hmm.
estrogen, like that's probably not like a great way to describe it. It just makes you feel like luxurious or lustrous, like
Yeah,
everything is moist, and like you are feeling attractive and confident and
like
like
more
able to,
energy.
yes, you're
Yeah.
energetic, you know, all of those things. And so when it's suppressed, those things may be gone. But also progesterone is a big key player too. So progesterone is, I like to call it the anti-anxiety hormone. It
Oh.
does it helps us feel less anxious, right, when we have enough progesterone, and it helps us sleep as well. It plays a big role in just like getting peaceful, restful sleep. And so when both of those are suppressed, like you're gonna have energy issues, you're gonna maybe have like tissue, like you said, issues, and then also anxiety and depression could like come in and play, or just that feeling of overwhelm or burnout could be there. And you may not be sleeping as well as you could be sleeping. Things are
Mhm.
not all bad though. I mean, that is, you know, not everybody is going to experience that while they're nursing, but
Mhm.
once the nursing journey is over and you're ovulating again, then your body should start, you know, kickstarting the process. So once you drop an egg during ovulation, then estrogen and progesterone production will start again, and it usually takes a couple cycles, you know, once that begins, to kind of get back to where you were pre-baby.
Yes, I see that with like tissue thinning. Well, because I find that people will stop chest feeding, lactating, whatever, but then it's like you wean, but then you still produce milk for a while. And then it's like a cycle after that is when I feel like your hormones, and this is me like knowing as much about them as you do, like that's when I think they normalize is like a month after no more milk production. What do you think about that? Is that true, or do you think that's like the same thing you're saying?
I mean, it's, yeah, I think it's right on par
Okay.
with what I'm saying, but I also think it could be different for everybody. So it's probably one of those like bio individual things. Like you might just like start right up and just go like a well-oiled machine, or it might take your body 3 months or 4 months, you know, before it really starts to feel kind of normal again. Or you might be dealing with an imbalance, you know,
Yeah.
and something else. And that's what we're like gonna chat about. But I was gonna pop back for a second
Yep.
and bring up another hormone that is pretty important, especially in the postpartum time frame. And it's one of the most common ones that I see imbalances with. And I think that's one of the questions coming up, but cortisol. So I just want to talk about cortisol real quickly. It is the stress hormone. It basically helps us have energy, right? So cortisol is produced by the adrenals, and it helps us wake up in the morning, get up and go. And then, you know, it kind of slowly declines throughout the day so that we can fall asleep. And then hopefully it rises again in the morning. That's what cortisol is supposed to do. But it also is activated when we're stressed out, right? It's when we're kind of triggered into that fight or flight state, your baby's screaming, you're feeling like you're overwhelmed or behind, you're feeling so much like mental pressure in this postpartum time, your cortisol levels, that stress rises, and that can make you feel jittery and anxious, and your energy is kind of all over the place. And so we can see it really high, but then we also see it really low too. That's a common imbalance. So usually high cortisol leads to low cortisol, and then you feel just like crap. You're just tired all day long. You just don't have motivation to do anything, and those burnout symptoms really creep in. So cortisol, progesterone, estrogen, and I think thyroid are what I call like the big four. Those are the big four ones that I deal with most often in my practice.
You said estrogen, progesterone, cortisol,
and thyroid.
Thyroid. Okay.
Yeah.
Taking notes. Okay, cool. That's interesting. Okay. Well, so I guess does it make more sense to you? It's like, I'm curious, I guess, like then like what are typical imbalances? And then I don't know if you want to do it like by hormone, if that's easier, or if it's all together. So it's not really like by one hormone or something.
Yeah. Let's talk about typical imbalances. And I actually do have some visual aids that I can show, because it just makes it a little bit easier to follow along just with this section. So do you care if I share my screen?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Let's just do that real quick. You'll have to give me permission, I think. If you go to share screen, there might be an option that says,
share multiple panels. There you go. You should be able to.
Amazing.
Now. There we go.
Okay. This is just going to help us frame our discussion a little bit better. So we already talked about the big four. So let's talk about some common imbalances, and then I can show you what a regular cycle is supposed to look like. So these are the ones that I think that I see most often in my practice amongst my clients, and you know, just from friends, like the symptoms that I experience, and myself, you know, I have dealt with these at one point or another. So the first one is estrogen dominance. So that is when we just have too much estrogen. Maybe it's too much estrogen overall, or when compared to progesterone, there's too much estrogen. And that's when we see short cycles. We see maybe even really long cycles. We see really painful, heavy periods. There might even be like fibrous tissue like coming out when you have your cycle, not just blood. Acne is a big one when there's lots of estrogen present. You might be dealing with mood swings. So just kind of like extreme PMS type symptoms, like that bloating, just not really feeling very good energetic wise. So that's estrogen dominance. Then low progesterone is sort of the flip side of the coin of that. And that is, like I said, the anti-anxiety hormone. So that really helps us feel more at ease, especially in that latter half of the cycle. So when it's low, you might feel anxious. Essentially, you might not be sleeping quite as well. It can also cause headaches when you don't have enough progesterone. So if you're someone who suffers from a lot of those like migraine type headaches in your cycle, it could be progesterone problems. It also can look like estrogen dominance. So some of the symptoms of estrogen dominance also show up with low progesterone, which makes it really hard to kind of tease out what's going on. Then we've got the low or high cortisol, right? So when you are dealing with lots of stress and you're kind of riding that cortisol roller coaster, it could be too low or too high, and you could have both depending on the times of day. But really just burnout is what I like to call low or high cortisol. So if you are not feeling motivated, you can't sleep, you're craving lots of sugar, you are just chronically feeling stressed out or overwhelmed, you're tired, but also wired. So you might be really, really tired, but then you can't fall asleep. You have this like wired mind, just kind of running. There's probably some cortisol dysregulation happening. And then the last one, which we probably won't talk too much about, but I like to throw it in because especially for all the postpartum people who are watching this presentation, have your thyroid checked after you have your baby, like maybe wait about a month or a month and a half. Just make sure thyroid numbers look good, because it's so common for your thyroid to just not quite start up the way it should after having the baby. Like postpartum thyroiditis is something that happens a lot. So if your thyroid is not producing enough, then this is the metabolism hormone. This is what helps us like actually just have energy. So you might feel cold if you have low thyroid. You might just feel sluggish or fatigued, or you can't lose weight. You're gaining too much extra weight and you can't figure out where that's coming from. It can make your periods irregular. It can make you feel depressed, no sex drive. So yeah, these are the common symptoms and the common imbalances that I see. And one last word on this is like, all of these hormones, especially the big four, you can think of them like a spider web. And they're very closely related and interconnected. And when one of them kind of gets out of balance, it pulls the whole web with it. And so you're going to see shifts and fluctuations across the board, which makes hormone imbalances really frustrating, because you're like, I don't know what the exact thing that's off here unless I do some testing. But when we attack these things from a holistic approach, we don't worry so much quite about that. We really just support the whole hormone system as a whole. And if you are able to bring one of them back into balance, then it shifts the spider web, right? So it helps bring the others kind of back in balance with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I feel like from a musculoskeletal perspective, like I'm always like everything's connected. Like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Okay.
Oh, you're fine.
My wife doesn't normally work remotely, and she is right now. And I just usually, I'm like talking about a child. I'm like, I have more support. Okay. Like, I shouldn't be complaining about a dog, but this is like the reality right now. God.
No, you're good. Hey, this is real life. This is real life right here.
Yes. Yeah. Gosh. But no, I was saying that like I feel like everything's so connected, and it just makes sense to me that it would be the same for hormones, and that you can't address, or like that you can't just address one, but also that like one thing affects so many things. Yes. Because while you were talking about it, when you said that estrogen dominance and low progesterone can like seem like each other, I was like, oh, I wonder if you treat them similarly. Like, but I guess that's, yeah.
Yes and no. Yeah.
Sure.
So I do. Yeah. So from like a functional nutrition perspective, yes, like a lot of the tips that I'll give here in a little bit, we would just do across the board, right? Because it will support just the endocrine system as a whole, the progesterone production, estrogen. But it is really useful if you are going to work with a practitioner, or like, you know, a functional medicine doctor or whoever, if you do some testing and uncover like what actually is out of balance, then you can add in supplements, and the supplements will be different based off of if there's too much estrogen or if there's not enough progesterone. So for example, if you are just not producing enough progesterone in that second half of your cycle, a supplement that's really helpful is called Chase Tree, or Vitex is the other term for it. And it's just made from a berry, right? But it's been scientifically proven to help women produce, or people who produce female cycling hormones, produce progesterone in a, you know, much more like high numbers. And then there's another one called DIM, so DIM, and I cannot for the life of me pronounce like what that stands for on this call, but it's essentially like an extract from cruciferous vegetables, and that helps you detoxify excess estrogen from the liver faster. So if you've got too much of it, then this will help support kind of getting rid of that estrogen waste, for example. So it is useful to know which way you swing.
Yes. Okay. I see. Yeah. So what are you, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, but the food and nutrition recommendations are all mostly the same, depending
similar
across the board. Yeah.
I guess like my other question, I just kind of lost it, but I guess I'm kind of digging into like the sciencey part of it because it's like so interesting to me. But is there something that like, I guess I'm curious, do you work with people like preconception, during pregnancy? Like what is working with someone look like that has imbalances? Let's say they're having issues.
Yeah. Okay. So I work with people with female hormones at any stage of their life, you know, so preconception, pregnancy, postpartum, and then also like perimenopause. So I have a less specialty focus on like menopausal women. I don't necessarily work with
Mm-hmm.
them, but anyone kind of in that stage. And most of my clients are parents of toddlers. That's pretty much the profile. Toddlers or a little bit older children, because they have kind of gone through that early parenting season and realize that their hormones are still not right. They still don't feel like themselves again.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you do up front is kind of assess like, well, what do we need? What kind of data do we need in order to uncover or build a plan? And that usually includes some kind of functional lab test and
Okay.
sort of also a benchmark of what is happening in your life right now. So I need to know what you fill out a big, informational survey around what kind of symptoms you're experiencing. We do a food and mood journal. We do a health history. We do an interview. And then we add that with any kind of like hormonal testing or gut health testing or blood chemistry panels. And then we build a plan from there.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, so
Yeah.
then I guess, so one of my questions was like, how do you know, like when you're like balanced, I guess, or sorry, when you're imbalanced? And I feel like we've like, okay, I can see the different symptoms, but then my other question is like, okay, well, how do you almost know when your hormones are balanced and that like accommodating for like life stressors, like sometimes you are going to have low energy, like those kinds of things. How are you like, and we're good?
Yes. Okay. So actually, I think this is going to help. Also, I'm going to share my screen again and show you
Oh,
just
sure.
this quick visual of what a test looks like, because it might also kind of clarify what that process feels
Hmm.
like. So this is actually a cycle mapping test that I did with a client. And the light green and the light red are what the most optimal cycle would look like. Like in a perfect world, if you are like the most optimal like human being, this is what we would want it to be. So the estrogen is the green line, and it really peaks in the beginning of the cycle, right? So that's building that uterine lining up, and then we're getting ready to release a follicle at ovulation. And then once ovulation happens, that's when progesterone needs to peak in that second half of your cycle, and it's more of a bell curve. We want it to really like rise kind of towards the mid point of that second half, and then kind of slowly
Mm-hmm.
decrease. But the dark lines here, so the dark green and the dark red, those were her numbers, right? Those were her estrogen and progesterone numbers, and they're flatlined. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't think she ovulated, because if
Yeah.
she had, then the progesterone peak would have been a lot higher. And the symptoms that she was experiencing, which triggered us to order this test, are things like acne. Her cycles are really short. This one was a 25-day cycle, but they were like, anywhere from between 20, 25 days. Anxiety, poor sleep, brain fog, really low libido. And all of those things can be in play when your estrogen and progesterone are so flatlined.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so anyway, so that's just kind of like a nice visual of what we ideally
Yeah.
want it to look like versus like
Mm-hmm.
what can happen. So let's talk about what you just asked me though. How do you know if you're like balanced?
Yeah.
You know,
What's
what
balanced?
is what does it feel like? Um, so I am a huge proponent of tracking your cycle really well. I think that it is the fifth vital sign. It really can tell us so much about the status of your health. So getting to know your body and love it really well, like when you feel off, like write it down. What day is that in your cycle? And then the next month, do the exact same thing. What we're looking for here is as much data as we possibly can get, right? But also, like, we want to know the cycle length. So that's one way to know. A typical normal cycle is between 21 and 35 days. In my opinion, though, I think if you really want to be more optimal, like I like the cycles to be between like 24 and 31 days. I think you feel better when
Yeah.
it's like that. You will have energy mostly throughout the whole cycle. I mean, some energy ups and downs are totally normal, especially in early parenthood. It's totally normal to feel tired. It's not normal to get sleep, wake up tired, and stay tired, remain tired,
I
for
feel
the
like
entire
that's a
day. If
good
you are,
distinction. Yeah, because I think
yeah,
like we just expect like as someone who doesn't have kids, I feel like what I hear about is I'm like, I assume you're just tired all the time, like all the time, no matter what. So it's good to hear like yes, tired is normal, but like, well, that's the whole part of a lot of these problems is like we don't know what's normal, when to complain about it,
yeah,
like that kind of thing. Yeah, so it's
right,
interesting.
right. Yeah. Yeah. If you are, able to get sleep and you're still feeling tired, that's definitely a sign. So your skin should be like relatively clear. Like if you are not dealing with too many hormonal imbalances, because cystic acne is usually what happens when you've got an estrogen or progesterone imbalance. Your like cycle symptoms are not bothering you, right? So you come to that week before your cycle and you don't experience like a ton of bloating or mood swings or anxiety or depression. Like we just want to kind of like cruise through that time and like, oh, here's my period.
Yeah.
Like that's the ideal state. And we don't want your blood loss to be too heavy or too light either. We kind of want like the Goldilocks, I guess, description of that. And I can't remember off the top of my head how many blood soaked tampons that is, but you can.
Oh, I know, or like pads.
There's like
I'm
references for it.
Yeah. Or it's like I almost remember it's like you shouldn't soak through a pad in more than like it's like 2 hours or something. But then
I
also
think
it's like not
something
many
like
people
that.
use pads, so it's like not really like a good example anymore. But yeah.
I think if you're losing too much blood, you're like, this is too much.
Yes.
Or like big clots, that come out. Your sleep, when you're able to get it, again, you're a parent, so it's very hard to get sleep. But if you are able to get sleep apart from kids, then it should be restful. You should fall asleep quickly. You should be pooping daily.
Yeah.
And your digestion does play a huge role in hormone balance. So we want to make sure you're going daily and your moods are, pretty stable.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, so then I guess, okay, like another question, which you've kind of answered, I feel like with like the labs, and then I guess it's like I guess my question is like the typical first steps after the labs. And I don't know if it's easier to think about it if like a certain problem, like an example, or is there like an easier way to answer that? But yeah, typical first steps once you realize you're imbalanced.
Yeah. So, let's see. There's so much that you can do on your own to impact your hormone health without even going and getting a test or working with a practitioner. I mean, there are just some foundational key things that you can do with diet and lifestyle that make a huge, huge impact. Not to say that whenever you work with somebody and you like have it tailored to you, of course, you might have a little bit faster results, or it might just like attack it a little bit harder core. But there's so many like key things, and I think maybe we could just talk about like what those aspects are. Before we get into it though, I do want to kind of backtrack just a moment and just go back to breastfeeding.
Yeah,
because it's going to be on people's minds when they're watching this recording, like, but I'm nursing, what do I do? Well, yeah, you can't really like change your estrogen and progesterone levels all that much when you are nursing every 2 to 3 hours, or at least emptying your, breast milk out that close together, because they're just so suppressed with the prolactin production. Not to say that these things are not going to be helpful for you though, because when you are done breastfeeding, your body will be in the most optimal place to just like pick back up and start off running, So I don't want to discourage you from implementing any of these things if you are nursing, but I do want to say, like, don't expect your complete like body to change while you're nursing doing these things either.
Fair.
Yeah. So just kind of want to like level set there.
Well, no, I mean, I think that's like smart in the sense I say that a lot for a lot of things in pregnancy. It's like, if you do this now, you'll be better afterwards. I feel like it's like the same thing with, breastfeeding or nursing or whatever. It's like, if you do it now, you'll behoove yourself later. So
yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So I think my favorite topic to start on, and one of the things that we haven't talked about is why. Like, why do we have imbalances?
Why do we have hormonal imbalances? Well, honestly, it's like, if I take my like out of my like practitioner brain, I'm like, oh, it's because I'm pregnant. Like, oh, or because like if I'm like, we already went over that. It's all those things. But then so like besides the obvious, what else is there? What other things cause it?
Well, I mean, in a perfect world, your body after the whole pregnancy journey and the nursing journey, your body would just like start right back up where you would want it to and look like that graph I showed, right? Like the peaks and valleys would be there, but that's not really what happens. I mean, in my experience, and this is what happened to me, like it did not like pick up where I wanted it to. And I didn't know or understand why. And there are so many things that drive your hormones. And the short answer is it's our modern lifestyles that cause these things to happen. Long and the
Isn't it
short
always?
answer. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so, and parenting too, just that early season of parenting is very stressful, and stress, mental stress, physical stress, super hard on the body, and it will cause your hormones. Remember the spider web, it messes with cortisol. So that means it's going to pull on estrogen and progesterone along with it. So we're overworked, we're overscheduled. We feel pressure to look or be a certain way after we have babies. That's very stressful. We eat foods that don't serve us, not that they're bad, they're just not necessarily serving our purposes of having optimal hormone health. Things like lots of processed foods or high sugar foods. We don't eat enough fat, because you actually need fat to build hormones. Or we're, having too many liver loaders. So things like alcohol, caffeine, or like stuff that you put on your skin. Blood sugar imbalances can cause your reproductive hormones to be pulled out of whack, because again, the spider web, right? And blood sugar is super close to cortisol. And when your cortisol is out of whack, it pulls on the other ones. So blood sugar imbalances, inflammation in the body. If there's any kind of inflammation, poor digestion will also be an underlying root cause. Dehydration, where a lot of us are walking around just chronically dehydrated. Too much exercise.
Oh,
so if
funny.
you exercise too hard.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, like, duh, but also it's like an interesting one. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because a lot of new parents want to lose weight. They're like, I want to get my body back. So they think I got to be really intense with my exercise and my movement. But if you are already dealing with suppressed cortisol, then that's just going to pour gas on the fire.
I was
poor
curious
sleep.
what you said. You said what you put on your skin affects your liver. What is that?
Okay, so just like chemical laden products that your body just has to detoxify out. So the liver is a fantastic, it should win the award for like organ of the year. I mean, it does so many things, like over 500 different body processes, but the biggest one in terms of hormones is the detoxification function that it plays. It's like a big filter, and it has to filter out any kind of products you put on your skin that your body is not going to use, or food that you're eating that your body doesn't need. So like just processed stuff or refined, sugar. It's got to process out the alcohol you're drinking, the caffeine you're drinking. And so if we keep it really busy doing that stuff, then what it's not doing is filtering out excess estrogen.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of sits and like upcycles back into the system, and slowly you get too much estrogen, right? So the idea here is just relieving some of the burden. Not that it's bad to have any of those things. It's just when you have, the dose makes the poison, right? So if there's just so much happening, then your liver can't do its important hormone work.
That makes sense. I mean, it makes sense that like when you avoid alcohol and like excessive caffeine and things like that, you feel better. You feel like all these things that you mentioned in estrogen dominance and stuff. It's like, oh, you just feel better. So that's interesting. Well, and then I had another question about hydration, but I was curious, like, do you recommend like people, like, I'm just thinking of like, a lot of us have problems with hydration, whether that's just like remembering to drink water, or like you don't have it with you and you can do all those things. But do you recommend those like the liquid IV, the LMNT, those things for people for hydration? I'm just curious.
Yes, I do actually. So, yeah. So hydration is one of the general broad recommendations that anyone can do, no matter what kind of imbalance you're experiencing, right? It's just good overall health maintenance to make sure you're hydrated. The nutritional therapy rule of thumb is 50% of your body weight. So whatever that number is, that's the fluid ounce number. That's the minimum. And then if you're nursing or if you're exercising really hard, you sweat a lot, we also want to drink more. Or if you're drinking a lot of caffeinated beverages or things that dehydrate you, then you want to even, increase that water ounce number. And then the electrolytes. So those packets that you were mentioning are called electrolytes. Those are a set of minerals that the body uses in order to move water in and out of cell membranes. And so if you're low in those minerals, doesn't matter how much water you drink, your body's just going to flush it right out, and you just end up peeing. You're just like peeing constantly. But if you have those minerals there in the right amount of proportions and numbers, then your body actually absorbs the water and really uses it to its full potential. And so that's why I feel it is very important to either salt your water. And I know that sounds super weird. But salt, sea salt, high quality sea salt is Mother Nature's electrolytes. So it has magnesium, it's got potassium, it has sodium. You just do a little sprinkle, like your big thing of water, and that's going to actually help you absorb your water more. Or if you love those electrolyte powders, then I think that they are great too, especially if you're working out. Like that's when I usually drink them, is the days that I work out. But Element is one of my favorites. So the Element V packets, and then there's another one called Relight. So RELYTE. It's like Redmond sea salt. That one's a really great one. I think just look for the ones that don't have a lot of like added extra things. So the liquid IVs are not my favorite because they're high in sugar, and they also add B vitamins and things to them. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You don't need all that stuff. Like those are, that's just extra.
I have to like dilute it. I like fill it up, drink half, fill it up again, because they're really cheap in Costco right now. So it got me some.
Oh yeah, you can get those. Yeah.
There's
honestly, there's a spectrum, right? I would rather you drink liquid IVs than not have any electrolytes in your water.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. But I agree. It's like I only personally feel like I need it when I've been sweating. So it's kind of, anyways. But okay, so what else is like bare minimum, not bare minimum, but like, baseline is the word you said, of like things we can do for feeling off.
I'm gonna just to help kind of give us a visual here to share my screen. So one of the number one things is digestion, support digestion. So remember the things that can cause hormone imbalances. One of them was digestion, and one of them was inflammation. Well, your digestive process is typically a big source of inflammation for a lot of people because there's like issues in the gut microbiome and things that are happening. So there's that piece of it. But also, hormones are made from nutrients. So they're made from vitamins, they're made from minerals, they're made from amino acids, they're made from fatty acids. Our sex hormones are steroid hormones, they're made from cholesterol. And if you don't eat those things, you don't get them. But also, if your digestion's not functioning, you're not absorbing them. So we really want to make sure that our digestive system is at tip-top shape, able to get those vitamins, nutrients all the way in. And these recommendations are just some like simple things that everybody can do. So slow down when you eat. I know this is a hard one for parents because you're like, I gotta like inhale my food. But there's two sides to the nervous system, like you're either really stressed out or kind of like anxious, fight or flight, or you're in rest or digest. And you really have to be in that calm state for your body to actually kick digestion on. Because if you think about it, you don't want to be running from a bear in fight or flight and pooping your pants while doing that, right? So
not ideal.
Yeah, when you're stressed, you want digestion to shut off. So that's why we just like sit down, take a deep breath, like kind of get in that state. So that's a big one. Actually, chewing your food is a super underrated thing. Like people don't chew enough. That mastication, that like happens in the mouth. There's enzymes in the saliva. That's the first step to digestion. And this is why when you drink a smoothie, sometimes you feel really bloated. So smoothies can make you feel really bloated, but that's because you've totally bypassed the first stage of digestion. So if you just let that smoothie kind of like sit in your mouth for a moment and then swallow it down, it actually helps you not feel so bloated. So chew your food.
Yeah. Okay. I always thought the smoothie bloating was like that you were sucking through a straw. But so that's I'm sure that sounds more like what you said, but I'm like,
it could be, yeah, for sure.
Well, no, but it's like if it was, it's a good trick to try to hold it in your mouth, and then if you don't feel bloated, then that's it. Like that's really interesting. But go ahead. There's this pelvic floor PT that specializes in nutrition, and she told, I was taking one of her classes, she was like, you should chew an almond 40 times, and I counted. Yeah, I counted and I chewed it like 5 to 8. I was like, it was absurd. So I like tell my patients, I'm like, just chew jokingly, I was just like 8 more times than you think you should. Like, or like, 8 times the amount that you're chewing. But it makes sense.
That's what I say too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's because who's gonna do that? Plus in nutrition school, they tell you to tell your clients chew to the consistency of a smoothie.
Oh my gosh.
But
that is so
yeah,
hard, though.
Yeah, it's really hard, especially when you're in a hurry and you've got little kids. I just tell my clients to chew like 1 or 2 times more than you would normally. Like,
Better than what you were gonna do. Like, sounds good to
yeah.
me. Sounds good. Yeah,
Um,
too funny.
yes. So also in smoothies too, they're really high in fiber if you're putting like a whole fruit in there, and that can also make you feel bloaty. But one of the things that you can do is try to chew it while, to help break it, get those enzymes started in the mouth.
Hmm.
So the other piece of it is don't guzzle water while you're eating. So don't, if you're going to guzzle water, like chug water, do it outside of meal times, because what that is doing is diluting your stomach acid. And we really want stomach acid to be super acidic, like ready to rip
Oh,
apart that food, to get it, going. And that water just kind of like brings the pH balance down. And we don't want that. So you don't need to be thirsty, but just don't,
hmm.
chug your food, or chug your water, like while you're eating your meals.
That's so
Um,
interesting because I had no idea. I mean, I tell people not to chug water because you'll pee all the time, and then you'll think it's your pelvic floor, and it's like, no, you just can't process that water. But that makes a lot of sense that your body's like, I don't have the resources anymore to to tear this food apart, basically. That's so
Yeah,
fascinating.
yeah. And so what
Yeah.
ends up happening is the food is not broken down enough, right? And so you can feel bloated, but then also bigger particles get into the lower GI tract. And the bigger the particle, the more damage it can cause to the gut lining. And we don't want that,
Mm-hmm.
right? We don't want food particles damaging the gut walls, because then they can get out into the bloodstream. And then that is what causes that latent inflammation from food sensitivities and so on. Um, so we want our stomach acid to be as acidic as possible,
Yeah,
essentially.
that makes sense.
And that next recommendation is kind of for that too. Like protein triggers the production of pepsin and stomach acid. So we want to make sure we're not skipping our protein. We want to be eating, enzymatic rich foods that help us break down the food that we're eating. So it's like pineapple, mango, avocados. And we also
Mm-hmm.
want to be eating fermented foods, right? So to help with the microbiome.
What are there other tips and tricks to improve stomach acid? I feel like I've heard some, but I don't want to say them. I feel like I'd be embarrassed if they're wrong. They're
Yeah,
like
yeah.
real
No, I'm
stupid.
sure. Do they have to do with like lemon water or apple cider vinegar?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's apple
Yeah.
cider vinegar for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
that's true.
Interesting.
That is true.
Okay.
Yeah, that helps 100%. You can have a little bit of water with like a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, and that will make your or your stomach juices more acidic to help break down that food.
Hmm.
Bitters spray. So there's like a spray, it's called bitters, and about 15 minutes before you eat, you spray it on your tongue, and it's a bitter flavor. And what that does is it tells your body, ooh, food is coming, and it helps to turn on the gastric juice process, and it like gets that really going. So bitters can be super helpful. Um, if I'm doing like a gut healing protocol with somebody,
Hmm.
then you can also, there's supplements, right? So you can also like take synthetic stomach acid to help get that like going again.
Hmm.
But I wouldn't do that unless you like tested your gut.
Yeah, like if you had to or something like that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Let's see. I feel like there was something else that made me want to ask. Oh, I guess are there other supplements that you recommend in general? Like
Yes,
depending on
yes.
yeah, yeah.
For sure. So I do think there's a bio individuality element to it. And that's when working with a practitioner can be super helpful, like just getting some labs run, just so you know, like what you might actually need. But in general, especially for hormone imbalances, I actually love greens powders. So athletic greens, paleo valley, like super greens. I mean, there's all kinds of greens powders out there. They're super absorbable, right? Our bodies can really use them, and they're full of all of the vitamins and minerals that our livers just like freaking love. And I just think that they are a great addition to your regimen if you are trying to balance your hormones. And then the other one that I think is useful for everybody is an omega-3, like a fish
Oh,
oil supplement, because we're
wait,
all kind of
why?
low in. Well, because our hormones are made from fats, right? And also, if you're dealing with any kind of low level inflammation, then
Mm,
those omega-3s are really good for bringing that inflammation level down. And then also, our hypothalamus is in charge of telling our ovaries to produce hormones. And those omega-3 fats are really soothing on the hypothalamus and the pituitary and the brain. And so it's just kind of like broad spectrum, like hits all the boxes, like one supplement that I think everyone can benefit from, because no one is eating enough fish. Let's be real. Like, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That would be tough.
Yeah.
Not enough
Yeah.
salmon to
But
eat. That was very fair. Do you think
no,
that's like
yeah, I don't
like
go
so
ahead.
omega-3s, do you think like most like I'm gonna say women, meaning like hormone producing like women, um like should take omega-3s, or is it kind of like depending on if you're imbalanced or if you're not feeling imbalanced, is that something that people should still do that they're likely missing?
That's a tricky question because it's not going to hurt you.
Oh, that's
Like
fair.
it's
Sure.
never, yeah, it's not going to hurt you in any way to take those omega-3s, but I don't normally give them or recommend them to people unless there's something going on that is
Mm-hmm.
supportive of. Because who wants to take a ton of supplements, right? So you just want to really kind of be targeted for the things that you are looking to get. And if you're dealing
Okay.
with any kind of inflammation, so inflammation, hormone imbalances, or like really high levels of stress, 100% take an
Gotcha.
omega-3.
High levels
Yeah.
of stress. Inflammation, high levels of stress. I mean, that probably is a large group of people, so it's fair.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say this is so funny considering like I remember I messaged you on Instagram, but like I totally started taking like greens after I messaged you that one time. Like you posted it was like one of the
Yes.
easiest things you could do. And I was like, sold. I was like, Amazon next. But it's I don't yeah, I think it's been really nice in terms of well, I also think greens are like I can't guarantee that my diet is perfect every day. Like I just can't. I really just I mean I try really hard, but it's just nice to feel that I'm like getting that little bit of
100%.
help.
I
Yeah.
yes, I freaking love greens. I feel like especially for new parents, you want to hit an easy button, just add grains into your routine. I mean, it's not going to hurt you. It's only going to benefit you, and it's easy and you feel good about yourself. You're like, "Hey, I just gave myself like, a bunch of nutrients. Like it's awesome."
Yes. Like that tasted like grass. Had to be healthy. So it's gotta be perfect. I mix mine with emergency sometimes when I'm feeling
Oh
like I
yeah.
need it. I don't know.
Yeah.
It tastes better. The grass was hard for me to get by at first, but that's okay. But
You get used to it.
you get used to it. Exactly. You get used to anything.
Yeah.
But okay, so like other, we've kind of talked about this, but like things, or unless is there any other like baseline things that you would want to talk about?
I mean, I have a whole list. I don't think we're gonna be able to get to them because we're gonna bump up
Sure.
to the end. But I think the
Uh-huh.
big ones are stay hydrated. So we've already talked about getting
Yep.
getting hydrated. Don't fear fats in your diet. So just kind of try to move away from that mindset of I have to eat low fat, especially if you're a child of the 90s. You're like low fat diets were the thing. But we actually need fat in order to create hormones. It's pretty important. So those healthy fats like avocado oil, olive oil, butter, ghee, coconut oil, omega-3s, eating your fish, all of that, super, super helpful. I recommend like getting 1 to 3 tablespoons of a healthy fat in at every meal. So I just like to say season your food. Don't eat bland
That's
food.
good.
Life's too short to eat bland food. Put butter on your broccoli. Beneficial.
Seriously.
So that's the one thing. And then I'm trying to
I'm
think of what to
so sorry.
prioritize to tell you about. Oh, no, you're fine. Probably the other thing I would leave you with is, can you increase your fiber? So especially cruciferous vegetables, those are super beneficial for hormone imbalances. Can you, when you think about plating, just like aim for half of your plate being made up of, fiber rich carbohydrates. Sweet potatoes, plantains, like starches are great. Whole grains are great, oatmeal, but really just like honing in on those vegetables and getting a ton of veggies in, super, super helpful because it helps with that estrogen detoxification. And then
Interesting.
lastly,
Well, you said
I guess
starches
probably,
are a fiber. I should know that,
yeah,
but
the,
like
the
that's still
resistant site, yeah, starches are kind of like in that
okay.
category.
Like a
Resistant
healthy
starches feed
starch.
your microbiome. Yeah,
Got it. Okay. Okay.
yeah.
I feel like that's something we're also just taught to avoid is like potatoes and things like that. But it's like I don't know, they can be healthy. So okay, that's
Dude,
interesting.
potatoes are like really high in potassium. Like
I
potatoes are
love
great.
potatoes. Potatoes are great.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Put some everything but the bagel on there. Like I'm down.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh
Yes.
man. One last thing. I'm so sorry. I have so many of these. I just
No,
want to
that's
make sure you
okay.
guys
That's
have some
okay.
actionable things to take with you. The last thing I
I'm
would
fine, but
say
yeah.
is don't eat a naked, try to avoid eating naked carbs. So what do I mean by that? Pair your carbs with protein and fat, because what
Yeah.
that's going to do is like kind of bring your blood sugar into a more stable state, right? So if you eat like a piece of bread on its own, that's going to turn to sugar in your blood and it's going to spike your blood sugar. If you eat that piece of bread with an avocado on top and a side
Mhm.
of breakfast sausage, that will not spike your blood sugar. So we want to make sure that we are not eating naked carbs when we kind of, you don't have to be perfect, but whenever you
Yeah.
can, don't eat a naked carb. Try to pair it with a protein and a fat, and that will
Mhm.
also go a huge way in helping you stabilize your blood sugar, which will impact your hormone health.
That's so helpful though, because I feel like so many people, I mean, myself included, like I'm about to do a Whole30, so I'm going to say goodbye to bread for a little bit, but I'd be really sad if I had to do that forever. Like we all do
Yes.
bread.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
nice to hear that it's like, oh, but if I have this piece of bread, I won't tank it. I just need, everything. I just need to be smart about it. Like it doesn't,
Yeah.
it's sustainability and it's moderation. You don't have to be so regimented. You just need to have a plan. It's kind of what I'm
Yes.
hearing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really cool.
100%.
All right. Anything else do you want to throw in there? Oh, any advice for new parents on balancing
Yeah.
hormones?
So yes, my biggest advice is, well, we never really, we don't have time to really
Oh,
fully go into it,
sure.
but
I
I
know. I'm
think,
sorry.
no, you're good. I think redefining self-care. So we talked about food and digestion and all of these sort of, actionable things that you can go do. But honestly, I'm telling you, stress plays a more important role than any food that you will ever eat. And so as a new parent, if you can find any time for yourself to do anything that you love doing, try to get that in. And it does not have to be a spa day. It doesn't have to be going to get a massage. It can be as little as popping your earbuds in while you make dinner and listening to a podcast. Like that is filling your cup. Don't let those small pieces of yourself go, because that is what keeps the stress from overtaking your life in that early season. So just trying to find the really small things that you can do consistently, it's going to make a huge difference. And same goes for the tactical things we talked about. If you just pick one thing from everything we mentioned, like I'm going to focus on drinking my water for the next week, that will make an impact. It will make you feel better. You do not have to do all of this stuff. So just don't let yourself get overwhelmed by like having all of these to-dos, I guess, to like work on. Just focus on a couple things, make sure you're getting some self-care in, and you're going to be fine.
I love that. I think that's so cool. I think that's perfect for new parents, but also I'm just like anybody probably needs
Yes.
that to
Yeah.
hear that advice as well. So I love that. I love that so much. Well, do you want to well first Lily, I'm gonna let you gather any questions you have, throw them in the Q&A. And then do you want to tell us like how people would like find you, reach you, like social media, website, things like that? We'll put that on like the blog
Yeah.
posts and stuff like that.
Yeah. So first off, you can find me at amberdonwellness.com. And I do have a guide there that's free. It's 5 ways to feel less exhausted in motherhood. And it actually has like 5 things to start out with that are small little things that you can do right now to kind of feel better. And so if you really want an actionable thing to leave this call with and you need a reference material, just go download that and you can use that as your guide. And then follow me on Instagram, for if you have questions, I'm happy to answer any DMs or chat with you. My handle is amberdon_wellness. I have a giveaway going on right now that's going to end on Friday. So if you go there, pop on, enter the giveaway, you might be able to get like a 45-minute consultation to talk about what are those things that are most impactful to you. So it's a great opportunity to work with me for free.
Oh, that's so cool. All right, very neat. This is my self-care from the 6-week-old hun. Oh,
Yes,
have
I
fun
love it.
paddling. That's so great. But Lily, we're so glad it was helpful. And I'm super excited because I think everyone that watches this recording will get like something out of it. I definitely like these are the questions I was supposed to ask you, and these are all my notes. So, so I was taking this. It helps me process. I'm very whatever that means, kinesthetic. But yeah, that was really cool. I learned so much today. So thank you so much for doing that.
Awesome. Yeah,
Yes,
thank you for having me.
absolutely.